That afternoon, a dry and fading sunlight stretched endlessly, spilling its sallow hues over corn rows where fragile green sprouts had only just begun to prick the earth. The countryside's eerie stillness seemed to stretch the very fabric of space, a place where time breathed slowly in rhythm with the land. Hung stood there, a tall but solitary figure, his shoulders slightly slumped as he leaned against the old bamboo gate, its slats polished to a sheen by the passage of years. His gaze remained fixed on his mother's frail, slender back as she faded into the distance, disappearing behind the towering eucalyptus trees whose pale trunks rustled in the wind as if whispering their own farewells. She walked briskly, her thin legs moving with determination along the familiar path, clutching a faded cloth bag, a relic of countless seasons of toil. What pierced Hung's heart was how she never once looked back, as if a single moment of weakness would cause her resolve to vanish into thin air. In his mind, her parting words continued to echo, etched into the silence, and quote, "I'm going to the capital to work for fun, to have some company. Staying home staring at the TV all day is boring, son," and quote. She had spoken with a light, forced cheerfulness to soften the sting of departure. When she handed him the heavy ring of house keys, their dry, metallic clinking sent a chill through his palm. He knew that behind the excuse of and quote, working for fun and quote, lay a private sorrow she couldn't bring herself to voice, yet, it was this fierce self-reliance that filled him with infinite heartache. A web of responsibilities. Hung let out a heavy sigh, laden with the anxieties clouding his mind. He felt caught in a labyrinth of duties. So much was resting on his shoulders, managing Hoaica's house while she visited family, ensuring everything remained as orderly as if a woman's hand were still there. Furthermore, the new sawmill he had co-invested in with a friend was in its difficult infancy, demanding his constant supervision. Then there was the artificial turf project, his passion and a new direction for his future, which remained unfinished amidst a chaos of blueprints and construction materials. Every task was a pressure point, and now, his mother's stubborn departure felt like an added psychological weight. An irrational resentment toward her began to stir within him. He was angry that at her age, with hair turned to gray, she refused to stop and enjoy the peace of being cared for by her children. He couldn't understand her craving to and quote, enter society, and quote, to plunge into the hardships of a bustling, worry-filled city when this home and garden were supposed to be her ultimate sanctuary. The clash between his desires and her will created a hollow void in his chest. Shadows in the garden. "Come inside, Hung. Let's tidy up the house a bit. If the grass gets too thick, snakes will crawl in," Hoaica's voice called out, cutting through his reverie. Her voice was clear, yet it carried a distant sadness, a silent empathy for what he was enduring. And so, the two of them set to work in silence. The rhythmic swish-swish of the bamboo broom and the clink of the hoe against stone were the only sounds in the twilight. Hoaica was also leaving soon, a fact that felt like another cut into the village and Apo's stillness. She didn't want to spend her life as a petty street vendor, struggling through early morning markets for a pittance. She yearned to go to the city to study, to seek a more stable and brighter future. Watching her diligently pull weeds, Hung realized that everyone has a horizon they are chasing, dreams and desires for a better life that those left behind may never fully comprehend. Hung paused, casting his gaze toward the newly planted cornfield next to the house. The stalks grew in neat rows, their tiny leaves reaching up from the earth, yet the plants looked pitifully stunted and frail. They seemed to be straining against the harsh weather and the barren soil. "This soil lacks nutrients," Hoaica said as she stood up, wiping sweat from her brow, her eyes lingering on the scrawny corn with quiet regret. "The weight of and quote, coldness and quote." Hung nodded slightly, his heart sinking as he recalled his mother's meticulous instructions from earlier that afternoon. "Remember to look after the boundaries so neighbors don't encroach." It's summer now. Bring the grandkids over so the house stays warm. Dawn and Oppos. Let it get cold and lonely. At the time, those words felt bothersome and redundant, as if she were worrying over nothing. He had reacted with indifference and a hint of irritation, believing he was more than capable of managing everything. But now, standing in the silent house where his mother's warmth still seemed to linger despite her absence, the word cold, finally hit home. This coldness didn't come from the late afternoon breeze. It sprang from the emptiness of the space, from the echo of his own breath in the vacant rooms. It was the hollow feeling of having no one left to remind him or nag him about the little things. Amidst the haunting silence of the home, he realized that no matter how strong a person is, they always fear solitude within their own sanctuary. Every corner of the yard, every doorstep now wore a cloak of melancholy, as if waiting alongside him for something far away, while the nutrient-deprived corn outside continued its silent struggle against the fading light of a farewell afternoon. As darkness fully reclaimed the landscape, leaving only the persistent drone of insects beneath the thickets, Hung finished seeing off his final customer of the evening. He stepped slowly into the main house, where the terrifying stillness made his footsteps on the tile sound hollow and dry. Out of habit, he entered his mother's room to close the window, usually kept open to catch the breeze, but now merely a gaping black void. In that cramped, modest space, the scent of the past remained vivid, the sharp tang of medicated oil mingled with the pungent, familiar aroma of beetle leaves, scents entwined with the image of his hard-working mother over the decades. He reached out to straighten the rattan pillow, an unconscious gesture to seek some lingering warmth, when his fingertips suddenly brushed against something hard hidden beneath. Lifting the pillow, Hung's heart skipped a beat. He found an old savings book, its cover yellowed with age, lying next to a piece of paper folded into quarters. The edges were frayed and starting to tear, likely from being opened and refolded countless times. With a mounting sense of dread, Hung unfolded the paper under the dim glow of the fluorescent light. It was a test result from the City General Hospital, dated 3 months ago, back when he was still consumed by sawmill blueprints and turf contracts. The soulless black and white print appeared before his eyes, but to Hung, they were a bolt of lightning tearing through the night sky, striking his very soul. End quote. Tumor, urgent surgical intervention required, end quote. Tucked inside was a small, ragged scrap of notebook paper with trembling, scrawled handwriting that carried the weight of a mother's ultimate sacrifice. The words cut through him like a blade. End quote. Hung, I'm not going away to work for money. I'm going for treatment. I know you're putting all your capital into the workshop and the field. I didn't, and Oppos. Want to be a burden that forced you to sell your dreams. This book is what I've scraped together from selling vegetables and rice all these years. Take it for your workshop. If I'm late coming home, or, if I dawn and Oppos, come back, remember to fertilize the new field. Our land is poor, but if you tend to it, the crops won and Oppos, wither, my son, end quote. Hung's legs gave out. He collapsed by the bedside, his breath coming in ragged, bitter gasps. The medical report in his hand shook violently with every silent sob. The bitter irony. It turned out that everything he had seen was merely the surface of a painful, submerged iceberg. He had blamed her for, end quote, staring at the TV, end quote, all day, criticized her for being sedentary, never realizing it was her way of gritting her teeth against the pain, using the noise of the television to drown out the physical agony ravaging her body. The trip to the capital, end quote, for fun, end quote, that she had insisted upon, a trip he had dismissed as elderly selfishness, was actually a solitary march toward the gates of death. She had chosen to face mortality alone in a strange place, all to protect his, end quote, career, end quote, and, end quote, finances, end quote, the flashy things he boastfully spoke of every day. In a state of profound psychological shock, Hung looked out through the closed window at the wide courtyard. The pair of breeding rabbits he had just sold, symbols of fertility and his own gifted husbandry that he had so proudly touted to the customer, now flickered in his mind with devastating irony. He realized the absurdity of his life. He could spend hours teaching others how to care for an animal. He could meticulously calculate every bag of fertilizer to save stunted corn in the field, yet he had been completely blind to the wilting of the most important, most sacred root of his life. A belated awakening. The connection between the nutrient-deprived corn outside and the disease eating away at his mother's body became clearer than ever. Poor soil needs fertilizer, but what could compensate for a soul impoverished by a lack of care? The night wind seeping through the crevices carried the coldness his mother had warned him about, the chill of a belated realization. Hung clutched the savings book to his chest, feeling the weight of a mother and Appo's love that transcended every material value he had been chasing. Those grand projects and ambitious plans suddenly felt small and meaningless compared to the frail silhouette of his mother fighting death alone in a distant city. He understood then that if he did not find a way to nourish this fading root, all his future success would be nothing more than withered branches on a dead piece of land. Don ket qua ka chien mang tin triat ly va le dong long nuoi. Dui de la ban di kon tat han trin qua hung. Hashtag the race against time. Hung bolted out of the house like an arrow released from a top bough. The harsh roar of his old motorbike tore through the stillness of the night, echoing across the familiar bamboo groves and village roads. This mechanical thunder was more than just an engine, it was the scream of a heart suffocating under the weight of belated remorse. The weak headlights swept across the roadside trees, creating jagged, flickering streaks of light that mirrored his own fractured state of mind. He had to get to the city. He had to find his mother in that vast sea of people at any cost, before the chasm between life and death became too wide to bridge. Against the biting wind, the thoughts of career and future that had once consumed him were suddenly turned upside down. He realized a simple yet brutal truth he had long ignored: a cornfield might wither from lack of nutrients, but in the next season, one can always fertilize the soil and start anew. A workshop might stagnate or even go bankrupt, but lost capital can be rebuilt. Even the unfinished stadium project was not the end of the world if delayed by months or years. But if he lost his mother, if the singular root that nourished his soul snapped, everything else would become meaningless. He understood now that no matter how much wealth he amassed or how successful a businessman he became, the house she had just entrusted to him would remain nothing but silent bricks and mortar, a space chilled to the bone without the warmth of the woman who had spent her life building it. Hashtag a lesson in gratitude. The connection between his mother's warning about coldness and his own solitary reality on the deserted night road became deeper than ever. Every revolution of the tires felt like a chase after a fragile hope, a desperate attempt to atone for the indifference of a son who prided himself on being the family provider, yet failed to perceive the agony of the one who gave him life. This story serves as a waking call, a painful reminder for young people caught in the whirlwind of startups, success, and personal ambition. We often promise to make it up to our parents when the conditions are right, forgetting that time is the most fickle form of capital. Do not let the pressures of making a living turn us blind to the silent pain eroding our loved ones. Hashtag the roots of sacrifice. Parental sacrifice is rarely found in grand gestures, it hides subtly behind well-intentioned lies, I and Appos, am fine, I and Appos, am happy, Don and Appos, worry about me, These are the resilient shells they build to protect their children and Appos' dreams, ensuring they never become a burden to wings that wish to fly far. Only sincere concern, a deep gaze, and a sensitive heart can hear the pain behind a smile or the sigh within the silence. Hung was racing against time, not for a contract or a profit margin, but to find his wilting and quote, root, end quote. He was racing to prove that the soil of his soul still held enough end quote, nutrients end quote, to preserve the sacred warmth of a mother's love.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người, cảm ơn mọi người vì đã theo dõi video của mình đến tận những phút cuối nha. Bây giờ thì mình đang làm video. Mình cũng đang làm gần xong rồi, chỉ còn một xíu nữa là sẽ xong. Video này thì mình sẽ đăng tải vào buổi tối hôm nay, ngày 11 tháng 5 nha mọi người. Hy vọng rằng mọi người sẽ yêu thích và ủng hộ cho kênh của mình nhiều hơn, cũng như là đóng góp thêm cho kênh mình nhiều ý kiến nữa để kênh mình có thể ngày càng hoàn thiện hơn. Và hy vọng rằng sẽ tiếp tục mang đến được cho mọi người những video hay và ý nghĩa. Bây giờ thì mình sẽ hoàn thành những bước cuối cùng, sau đó đăng tải lên kênh. Cảm ơn mọi người rất nhiều. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong những video sau. Nhớ đón xem những kênh tiếp theo, video tiếp theo trên kênh của mình. Và đừng quên là nhớ like cũng như là đăng ký kênh để không bỏ lỡ bất kỳ video nào mọi người nhé. Sự ủng hộ của mọi người là động lực rất lớn để mình tiếp tục làm video trên kênh. Tạm biệt mọi người và hẹn gặp lại trong video sau.